What makes your podcast different? With so many podcasts out there now, it's important that you spend time thinking about how to separate your podcast from the masses and really come up with a solid concept for your business or brand. So recently on my live show, Working Lunch, I spoke to Gareth Evans, who is founder of a company called 1860, and he produces lots of podcasts for corporate clients. And I really wanted to get his take on how to concept and come up with a solid structure for a business or brand podcast. So let's dive in. Let's just kick off today's topic then, the first topic, so we're podcasting for brands. Now, I'm a big believer that, every company should really be starting to consider using podcasting now. If you're not already running a podcast, it's a fantastic way of communicating your message to your customers, to potential customers, and it's really good fun as well. Or potentially if you're a larger organization, it can also be really good for internal comms as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There are now more ways than ever to sort of engage with people, and that means more noise than ever to try and cut through. And for certain brands and organizations, the popularity of podcasts has meant that there is now another channel that they can explore, which may be the best channel for that audience. It might be the best way of connecting with that audience. And up to this point, maybe they were concentrating on video or social, and maybe they weren't hitting the mark. So I think it's worth every sort of brand assessing where their customers are, what sort of content they're consuming, and what content they can create that is going to really engage them.
Okay, so let's say I have a business, startup or some kind of organization. I'm thinking, right, I want to go to podcasting. What should my first step be?
Always start with the audience. I chat to a lot of companies, and they've initially got their goals in mind of what they want to achieve, and podcasting isn't a short-term game. If your goals are trying to make some sales or trying to promote a particular one-off event, then podcasting might not be for you. But as in terms of growing a community and growing an audience, building up brand trust, loyalty, all of these things, it's great. So start with your audience and work out what content it is that's going to benefit them and that's going to enrich their lives, and then kind of work backwards from there. And the sweet spot is where your goals are here of what you want to achieve, and the audiences are here of what needs you're meeting for them and how you're making their life better. And the great thing about podcasts is you have more real estate.
I think you make a very good point, where a lot of people, when they go into podcasting, I think they just sort of think, oh, we could just sit and kind of make it up as we go along, or that sort of thing. I think having a sort of solid plan and actually starting to think about who your audience is whether that's an existing audience as a business or the sorts of kind of clients that you want to be attracting. If you kind of have a full understanding of that before you actually go into recording anything, it will help certainly kind of, carve that pathway and make sure that the content is going to be on point.
Yeah, exactly. A brand in this day and age is going to have had a content strategy of some sort. You'll have been creating content in terms of video content, blog content, digital, social media. You can look at all that content, look at what went well, what didn't work well, and look at there may be stories that you told on a blog that could be told even better and brought to life through audio. And half of the work might have already been done. You might have been creating that content already, and because you have these resources behind you as a brand, with content teams, social media teams, stats people, all of these people that can sort of crunch the numbers and figure out what sort of content's working for you, and start with that as a base if you've already got a sort of decent content strategy.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's really good advice, and that's a great tip in terms of like looking back at the blog posts that are performing the best. We've done this a few times. And either you think, right, okay, well, let's look at the blog posts that are performing really well, and maybe you want to update those blog posts or turn them into a video. And one of the things we've tried actually a few times is actually just recording almost like, like an audio book of that blog post. So literally just reading it out, narrating it and embedding just a player at the top for that blog post. The content's already there. All you need to do is sort of sit there and read it out yourself. And if you don't want to do that yourself, you can even hire someone to do it. There's services like, I think it's ACX, isn't it? Where you can literally hire people who will narrate for you. One of the benefit of doing this, if you actually put that audio player on the page and people click play and start listening, they're spending more time on that page, which has a positive impact in terms of your SEO, because Google see that people are actually engaging with your site and staying on pages for a long time, which is really good. Let's talk about how does a brand go from saying, okay, we want to have a podcast, we want to now build the podcast. How do we come up with a concept? What are the key things to look for, and how do we make it interesting?
There is noise in the sort of general content world, and then the growth of podcasting. Well over 1 million podcasts out there now.
Yeah.
So you've got to cut through that, and it's gone are the days when you can stick a budget microphone on a table in between two people and record a conversation and put that out and expect people to listen. People's expectations have naturally got higher. So what people are prepared to listen to is also got higher. So, be as creative and as adventurous as you can. And I think that if your idea of what a podcast is are kind of straightforward interview podcasts, then maybe educate yourself in different sort of formats. So there are so many podcasts out there. Ask for recommendations. Get on Twitter. Ask people. People are always willing to give their podcast recommendations and always happy to. That's a great thing about podcasts. Get inspired by the way that different podcasts are produced. Maybe that's the way that the interviews are framed. Maybe that's where they're recorded. The music, sound. Get inspiration of what a podcast could be first, and think, actually, I quite like that. That might fit for our brand. So I think like researching and listening to podcasts and asking other people what they like is a kind of a good place to start. It's about building, how to grow an audience once your podcast is out there. Yeah. And I think the interesting thing about podcasts is they create communities, they create micro communities, and they always have done. The great thing is that if you're a brand and you're creating a podcast, you have the ability to create your own podcast community, but really involve your existing communities in that as well. So it might be also, if you do have the budget to spend, it could be worth tapping into other podcast listeners. So you might be wanting to sort of buy spots, advertising spots on other podcasts. Say you're a tennis racket manufacturer, you might want to, and you're making a podcast about tennis, you might want to advertise your podcast on other tennis or sports podcasts, and trying to sort of tap into those communities that way.
Yeah, I'm really with you on that. I think at the moment, podcast, the sort of traditional, as you might imagine advertising to be, like 30-second spots at the beginning and end of podcasts, they don't really pay very well. You generally have to have very large audience to get involved with one of these kind of big players like Acast in the first place. I'm with you there, Gareth, when you say, forge your own deals, because you might say only have a couple of thousand downloads an episode. But if 2,000 people are completely focused on a specific, audience, genre, whatever it might be, type of market, niche, and they're really, really engaged, and you can prove that to a potential sponsor, that can be really valuable, because like for most businesses, getting up and speaking in front of 2,000 people and be able to actually pitch your products and service to a relevant audience, is kind of quite a special thing. So I think the best thing to do is just sort of put together like a pitch deck. So just like a 1 or 2 pager, explaining what your podcast is, how many people listen to each episode on average, how many downloads you've had over time, and the sorts of people that kind of are connecting with you. And I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier, like, about getting people engaged. If you can sort of show people, say, like comments to prove that people are actually, who they say they are, and your audience isn't just like random people, or you have a mailing list which complements your podcast, and you've got good open rates, all of that will go towards the potential sponsor saying yes. So you just need to try and pitch it in as positive light as possible, and then go and seek out relevant sponsors, not just random ones. Cool. Gareth, thank you very much for your time today. That was really interesting. If people want to find out more about you and what you do, how can they get in touch?
Twitter at EvansGaz is my personal Twitter, or at 18 _ 60 or 1860.co.uk. They're the main channels, I think. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Great, Gareth. Lovely to speak to you. Take care.
Great. Thanks very much.